Thank you. Thank you, Giselle. So we'll actually, the next question is directed at you, Giselle.
Okay,
It's
good.
been, since actually you and I started our careers a little over 20 years ago, there have been so many reform efforts that have taken place. Thankfully, there's been a lot of changing of minds, of electeds and community members, and some whose minds haven't changed, and we see the pendulum, swing as it does. My question to you is, how do we make sure that Latina communities are benefiting from these reforms, in general, through things like language barriers, et cetera? How do we protect these reforms in times when it does seem as though the pendulum is swinging on criminal legal system reform?
That's a big question. I'm going to answer it, and I'm going to walk us through a journey very quickly, and I'm going to say what Wang, said in 2 minutes. And thank you for aging us too.
We started in our teens.
In our teens, but also there was a real reform effort in family court, and those of us who were here, we understand what it was. It was that close to home initiative. Within that process, there were so many people that needed to participate. There were multiple coalitions, multiple conversations, and then we got to see the raise the age, and then now we're thinking about like what is next. When we think about involving Latinx, I think about the organization that I have been leading, scaling it. It needs to be, no work is done in isolation. And then the other thing that is very important is this organization is grounded in cultural relevancy. We have our organization evaluated, and now it says it is culturally relevant and culturally sustainable. But that there's this other aspect, and there's this one young person, I remember when he came into Exalt, from Mexico, but he didn't even speak Spanish, right? He spoke his native tongue. And he said, those laws that we have here, he never even heard of it. So there is a process that we understood, and Eva is here, my team is here, the court staff, educators, I think everyone is here. They take on this deep commitment of understanding who are the young people. So then there's a process of real education, of learning, of understanding what are their barriers, but then ensuring that we're partnering with other institutions, that it's not that they also carry the same philosophy and the same approach, but that they also have resource. So we're in 17 Battery now, and our big partner is Trinity Wall Street. They're always feeding the migrants who are here. Well, guess who is feeding the migrants with the staff at Trinity Wall Street, our young people? Within that process, what we begin to understand is that there's so much that we don't know. I think that the other big one that we got to see in terms of even our staffing patterns, in terms of our culture, a lot of us don't know Spanish. A lot of us do not speak the language. A lot of us don't even understand the technicality of a system. So then it's like, how is it that we support organization, institution to consistently educate ourselves, understand the landscape? And I want to highlight this other thing that I always talk about when we're honoring Hispanic Heritage Month, is that we're not a monolith. And by making us a monolith, we don't understand the complexities and what the questions that were raised. Why is it that people don't come forth? Why is it that they don't bring up their issues? So at the process that in family or individual it has a crisis, think about at how quickly we need to accelerate trust with them. And if our conditions are not created that they feel that they could connect with us, understand the multiple barriers that we create. So I appreciate that question, which is like, how do we consider Latinx? I think that there is this other point that when we're thinking about policy, systems, and organization, where are our gaps? What is it that we don't know? And I think that that is something that this organization at Exalt, we have done extraordinarily well. We never underestimate that a young person walking in through our door is a very different person. That a young person walking in through a Caribbean island, and if we're not too sure of what was their culture, it is our responsibility and our obligation to become informed so that we can then not just greet a young person, but really navigate them. The other thing that I want to bring up in terms of Latinx, and I wanted to share with you, Assemblywoman, that from Colombia, Bogota, Colombia, the First Lady, she calls me. She's going to have dinner with me on Friday. Well, think about this. It's civic engagement. I don't know much. That's what I had to do. I had to do a little bit of learning before I even sit down with her. So the first dinner will be about, tell me a little bit about you, but she has an urgency. And I think that overall, it just magnifies the responsibility of how do we create policies and system with humans. And in terms of our Latinx, and I'm going to close out with this one, we're prepared as an organization, but I still have questions. Because we may just know a few communities, but we don't know them all. So then what is our level of investment? How do we ensure that we understand? Because it's beyond a language barrier. I think that the other one is like, what is our cultural barriers that we need to confront and prepare? So I answered the question from that lens and that perspective. Thank you.
Thank you. Assembly member, so how do we raise awareness about alternatives to incarceration, about different responses than relying heavily on the criminal legal system, particularly with communities, Latina communities, so that folks can access those things. And there's maybe some narrative work to be done there. I told a friend the other day, we were at the El Diario event that the commissioner mentioned, and I whispered in a friend of mine's ear. I said, it's a dirty little secret. There's a lot of conservatism in the Latina community, and he laughed. And so how do we raise awareness about alternatives to incarceration, public health approaches to some of what folks rely on criminal legal system for, and how do we move legislators, electeds with Latinas as part of their constituency to want to utilize those kinds of approaches more where there's usually criminal legal system reliance?
So a couple of things. I think what this election has done is shown us that it's not a secret anymore. There are many people who look like us that don't like us. What's that, old skin folk and kinfolk kind of thing. I like to think of this in the same way that we think of mental health issues. Every single one of our families has them, but we don't like to talk about it. Many of us have folks in our own families who have been involved with the system, but we don't like to talk about it. We like to point fingers at others and talk about how en esa familia de allá, a mi vecino. But we are not going to look inside our own household, and we're not willing to talk about it until people like us come along and force the conversation to happen. When we were working through Clean Slate, some of the conversations that we had were with many of these more conservative religious groups. And when you start to really dig in, you start to realize how many people actually have a criminal record themselves. We had folks in our own house, meaning the assembly, staff, who the day that it passed came to Robin and I to thank us for it. Because they themselves had it, because the people who were, because their own children were involved. And so I think when you really have conversations that are more frank, and you have people who are willing to have those conversations, you get to a place where you're forcing it. 10 years ago, God forbid anybody talked about going to therapy, 15 years ago. And so my hope is that the more that we actually start to face our own demonios, which are, the little secrets in our families that we don't like to talk about, that the more of us who are actually bringing that to the dinner table, to the Sunday service, to the family chat, to the cafecito with chisme with the prima, that you're really talking about, this is what's happening in our house, here's what we should be doing. And that's how, at a local family level, we get more people to understand that there is impact to being involved with the criminal justice system, but that there are other avenues. And the conversation about other avenues cannot be had when you are not talking about, and this goes to something you mentioned, the bill that basically creates a diversion. That bill by itself is not going to work if we don't talk about the fact that we don't have enough programs where people speak the language that is needed, and that in many of those programs, even if you speak the language, if it's folks who are non-citizens, they can't partake in those programs because those programs are paid with federal dollars. So someone who may be a DACA recipient who got in trouble with the law and is looking for another option, even if they took the plea or, we passed a law and they're not required to take the plea, there is only one program in the entire city, and it's out of the Bronx, and I think they have like 2 therapists or 2 program managers, whatever the term is, that serve an entire city of folks who may be looking to take a plea, who may be looking to do better, but cannot partake unless they go to that program. And the wait list is like 6 months to a year. And so you have to have all of those conversations. And with elected officials, you know what worked for me? Put them right in front of my face. Before I took Clean Slate, and I've been fully honest with people about this, I did not think that I could do this bill. I did not think of the criminal justice system in the same way. But when you put in front of me someone who could not get housing after 25 tries, who could not get a job after 25 tries, who brought their kids, who brought their grandkids, it changes how you think about the people who are involved in the system, because it's always los de allá. The people over there, it happens to them. It's almost like, but I saw that on TV. No, now you're seeing it in your face. And so that's how you begin to change the minds of policymakers, and it's what worked. And I will forever use Clean Slate as an example of how to actually create change, because yes, it took 3 years, but when you had people who were our biggest opponents, the district attorneys, who were our biggest opponents, who became people who said, this is what we need and this is how we do it. Same thing with legislators, folks who had never actually sat across from someone who was formerly incarcerated, or, didn't know that they were sitting across from someone who was formerly incarcerated, because I'm sure that they just didn't know about it. And now they knew not only this person is a formerly incarcerated person, but this is the impact that not being able to move forward is having on their lives and the lives of their children. And it changes how people begin to see policy. It now becomes humanizing. You humanize the issue. You make people feel bad about saying no when you have a real human making the ask.
So in the interest of time, Andrea, I'll go to you with this last question, and we'll move to Q&A. So, there have been reforms over the years. They've not always hit the mark in terms of addressing racial disparities. They say the road to hell is paved with good intentions. How would you advise, or what thoughts do you have around how we address racial disparities within the criminal legal system, particularly as it pertains to the Latina community?
Great question. So I've been doing policy work in New York State for 10 years now, and we have passed a lot of really great reforms. Raise the age, bail reform, discovery reform, ICE out of courts, like there's a whole laundry list, right? And yet I still have a job because even when we pass these reforms, there is still so much work that is revealed that needs to happen, especially on the racial disparities, I think. So I'll give the example of Raise the Age, which Giselle spoke about, and her organization is much more involved than I am at this point. But I will say, by all accounts, it should be said that Raise the Age has been a massive, massive success. you know, New York was, for those of you who don't know, New York was the last state in the entire country to raise the age of criminalization. What does that mean? 16 and 17-year-olds who are arrested in this state after every other state had changed the law were treated as adults. That means they were sent to Rikers, they had, you know, potentially a permanent criminal conviction. It was terrible, and we changed that. And the numbers have been great. I mean, we changed the law in 2017. It went into effect in 2018. Arrests for the most serious juvenile offenses are 68% lower in 2022 than in 2013. I saw a report from the Criminal Justice Agency that said there were 4,500 arrests of 16 and 17-year-olds in 2017, and then in 2020, there were 1,300 arrests. I mean, that's huge. We have 3,000 children no longer being arrested for crimes. That's wonderful, right? That's a huge success. And yet my office has a whole unit of lawyers and social workers who serve the kids who are left in the system. And what do the kids who are left in the system look like? It's a better system right now. We have the possibility to transfer those cases to family court. There are some more resources available. The numbers are lower, and yet when we take a look at who the children are who are detained in these youth facilities, what do they look like? Right, I don't even have to tell you all. You all, everybody here knows, right? So the issue is still there. We still have, it's a smaller number of kids, and that's great, but they're still there. So, but I want to offer a solution that the Raise the Age Coalition has come up with, right? Because we've been getting some backlash. The Republican members have been pushing to roll back Raise the Age. They're like, oh, look, this one kid did this here and this one kid did that there, so we need to get rid of this whole law. Again, we were the last state in the country to change the law. I don't think we should be one of the first to get rid of it again, but you know, here we are. But so what have they done to combat this? Well, they introduced legislation for the Youth Justice Innovation Fund. And they've been doing a lot of advocacy around this in Albany as of March 2024. It's been publicly reported that less than 1/3 of the $1.5 billion appropriated for the Raise the Age law's implementation has been spent. Yeah. So what does that mean? When they passed this law, we said, we're gonna need money, right? We can't just stop arresting kids. Like, you know, those social problems are still there, so we need to invest in services. And so the government actually allocated, what is it, $1.5 billion towards services for kids. And here we are, 2024, less than 1/3 of that money actually made it out the door. That's a huge problem. I mean, for once we actually got the money in the budget. Half the time we don't get the money in the budget. We got the money in the budget, and they won't write the checks to groups like Exalt, who are doing the work. I mean, it's crazy. New York City accounts for half of the state's youth justice system population. They receive $0 in state funding. All of that money is supposed to be for upstate. Great, we need $1.5 billion for upstate, but let's write the checks. Let's make this happen, right? Because that is the answer, right? That's the answer to stopping all, the way that we address the problems in our communities, right? The reasons that children may engage in acts that are illegal are because we don't have the resources and supports that they need to be successful. How do we do that? We invest in programs like Exalt. We invest in our schools. We make our schools and our communities safe places where kids have opportunities. We have $1.5 billion allocated and we can't even spend it. So I would just say yes, we've done great work. Yes, it shows us all the work that needs to be done. So we just keep working. We just keep working to create solutions, to figure out how we address these problems. And we keep offering those solutions, and we just keep on going. And that's what we do.
Thank you, Andrea. So I got the sign. So we are going to move the Q&A. I mean, first, before we move the Q&A, I just want to say that we must protect Raise the Age. That's a very, very that's a bill that was very dear to me personally. I was one of the advocates on Raise the Age, as someone who was charged as an adult at age 17 and went away for 10 years. So we must protect Raise the Age, but I want to shout out some of the architects, folks like Nancy Ginsburg, who's not here, folks like Anna Bermudez, who's in the room. So thank you all. So, Q&A.
You mentioned something about the Latin American community have a hard time, or they don't get together in regards to talking about their some of the problems in their own household. But I think one of the patterns that I'm able to realize is that when you are raised in a survival mindset and environment, you're gonna have, your emotions gonna be dysregulated. And when you have this conversation with family members, they're gonna get triggered. So one of the resources, one of the things that should be available for Latin Americans is like how to have this conversation. It's not that, it's that they don't want to, it's that they don't know how. And that's very important because like the environmental factors actually impact how people respond to everything that's happening to them. So a lot of times it's easy to tell, and that's not just to justify and blame anybody, it's just an awareness, so people have different point of view. But a lot of times, even according to like psychological statistic, is that when people even raise, even like certain animals, when they're being tested in labs and they're being raised in stressful environment, that's gonna affect how they're gonna respond and how they're gonna accept. So if you're having let's say, I'm gonna give an example, you have a mom, she's a Latin American mom, and she have, like certain trait because of generational trauma, and you mention something, that's gonna end the coffee gathering, or that's gonna end the Thanksgiving dinner, and she's gonna probably even block some of the family gatherings, because a lot of the times, and even like television network for Latin Americans actually promote this type of trigger, because they actually have telenovelas that they put women to be very passionate, very fiery. So that actually teaches them, this is a way that you should have this conversation. I have to either scream or get triggered, because that's considered to be normal. So I think a lot of things that I'm hearing this morning is that there's different factors, but one of the key issues is how can you teach this community how to know who they are? How to actually tap into the generational patterns that actually are surfacing now and actually creating all this problems socially, that instead of like either politician, people or independentists, is like, let's actually go after the root causes that actually has been affected this community, for them to be productive citizen of society and actually tap into their purpose, the God-given purpose, so they actually can be citizens to actually, if they know who they are, they actually could contribute to society and say, you know what, I'm this artist because of this, but I'm more established as an artist because I know who I am. And that also goes back to, let's start talking about generational trauma in this community, and that's gonna help a lot.
Thank you, thank you. So, what that brings up for me is toxic shame that so many of our families experienced. My grandmother's kicked me out of the house I lived in with her, like, go outside somewhere for bringing up certain topics. And, that's a cultural thing, that's a generational thing. So, thank you for that comment. I just want to turn to see if any of the panelists want to say something about that.
Yes, hi. First, I just want to thank you all. It's been wonderful to receive so much energy, wisdom, information from all of the panelists today. My question is, as an emerging advocate, someone who's new to this field, how do you not become overwhelmed by the magnitude that you mentioned, Ms. Castro? How do you remain steadfast on the mission? Where do you start? How do you keep going?
I'm going to answer that question. I get that question a lot. And I'm going to speak to you as a Latina woman. And I will say, a few things which, the Assemblywoman, began to highlight. My brother was incarcerated. My nephew, when I used to go into the courtroom so many times to have support judges to consider vacating a sentence, I used to go into the courtroom all the time, and I very quickly understood myself. I understood what years ago an executive coach told me. trust that on a Monday morning, whether you're conscious of it or not, you woke up differently. You matured somewhere. You're holding on to something. You're probably regressed. And then you need to like sit with yourself and understand who you are. And I do that. I meditate every morning. And what I understood in terms of what was taking care of myself that no one-on-one therapist could tell me was that never on a Monday I could walk into a courtroom. And I would say that to my staff, unless if I need to be there, I will be. But get ready. You will be the one who will show up on a Monday. Because on the weekends were the points where I was able to process my own family and what was happening. And I knew that on a Monday I was driving an initiative and an organization forward. So as an advocate and as you begin to enter your adult development stage, it will be very critical and very vital for you to really understand who you are. No one really talks to us too much about like what is our leadership stance, and the immense work that it takes, the emotional, psychological, spiritual toll on us. And then that becomes your own independent journey. And I say as a woman because it is so true, we're consistently processing, and we're processing deep information, but that by the time that we walk into a room, trust that that group did not process all that you did. So then you're always with this dance of having to go all the way back. I call it situate myself, ground myself, so I could ground everyone to then move people. So what I would say, patience, and always assess what it is that you're doing, what decisions that you're making. That is also how you start to take care of yourself, because if you made a decision that later on you realize that was not the best one, at least that you understood your own thought process and how deliberate you took that into consideration. Said a lot, but what takes the toll is the emotion. And that is that thing that is so fluid, that you can't really control it because it's always so alive and dynamic within you.
Thank you, Giselle.
The only thing I'll add to that is, and I don't know your story, and many of us are impacted in one way or another by the criminal justice system, either personally, but many people aren't. And I think one of the things that worked for me at the time that I took Clean Slate, I was not impacted by the system. Things change in life and families, and I came to understand it. But at that time, the one person who always centered me was the late Marvin Mayfield. And one of the things that he used to say to me was, we can't afford for you to give up. And so if you're going to take up a cause, know that you're taking it up with the responsibility that you owe it to others. And I know that, you know, that sounds perhaps a little sexist, that we as women have to be the caretakers. I get that part, but I'm not looking at it from that angle. I'm looking at it from when you take up a cause, you're taking up a responsibility to fight for something in a way that honors that something. And it's not going to be easy, especially if you're getting into this. It's hard, but center it around the people who are really impacted deeply if it happens not to be you, and know that they can't afford for you to give up.
That's right. So we are at time, everyone. So thank you so much. Thank you, Assembly Member Giselle, Andrea, and thank you, John Jay, for this wonderful event. More to come.
Let's give our panelists another warm round of applause. Thank you very much. And so we're about to transition to close this event out. And we mentioned that there's going to be an announcement of sorts. And before we make the announcement, you know, I'd be remiss if I didn't acknowledge the fact that Mike Rampel and DCJ and Crystal and Sarah and the whole DCJ team, right? Their commitment to making sure that this happens in partnership with MNN Studios and the Institute of Justice and Opportunity. But the person who really drove a lot of this stuff is my colleague, Crystal Rodriguez. So I want to give her a warm round of applause and acknowledge her, and I want to call Crystal up to make this really powerful announcement. Let's honor Crystal Rodriguez. Give her a warm round of applause.
afternoon. Again, thank you so much to all of you for joining us. You know, as I was listening to the remarks of the day, so many thoughts and feelings resonated with me both personally and professionally. And it called to mind this moment that I had in a courtroom back in my public defender days, where I started my career after law school as a public defender in Brooklyn. And I remember I was on trial with a young client who was Hispanic. And I remember that we were picking a jury. And so, you know, much like, you know, part of a jury of your peers, which is your constitutional right if you're on trial, is that those people who make up that jury also are fair demographically, racially speaking. And there's a whole case law, bats and challenges, that there's case law supporting the fact that individuals who are on that jury should be reflective of the community. And as we're selecting this jury, it was pretty clear that the three first people that the prosecutors tried to eliminate from that jury was a Hispanic man. There was three Hispanic men in a row. And my client sitting there as a Latino man, right? And so I raised what's called the Batson Challenge, and I say, hey, Judge, I had wonderful co-counsel there. There was two of us trying this case. I said, my client is a Latino man, and I make all the elements, all the requirements to show that there may be some purposeful elimination of the Latino representation on the jury. Now, for those of you who don't know, the legal response, right, the burden would shift to the prosecutor to demonstrate that they have a non-racial basis for having eliminated those three people. So does the judge turn to the prosecutors and say, hey, why did you select those three men to remove them from the jury? No, that's not what happened at all. What happens is the judge calls in one of the people we were saying was struck because of his racial background as a Hispanic man. Calls him into the room. She asked him several questions about, I don't know, where he went to school, where he was employed, and then asked him to leave the room. Right? The jury isn't there. Most of this conversation is happening outside the presence of the jury, prosecutors, my client, and us. And then she says, but he's too dark to be Hispanic. This is 2015, 2016 Brooklyn. This is not that long ago. And the reason I bring this up, my little Latina, Boricua con orgullo self, my heart sunk in that moment. I literally fell to my butt on the chair. That was literally my reaction. And it was involuntary. I was stunned, I was shocked at this response from the court. And at that point, you know, what the reason I share this is not to shame the judge. That person has long retired and moved on, I'm sure. But it's to say that these misperceptions, misunderstandings that yield all those data outcomes we talked about in the beginning, those disparities we talked about in the beginning, permeate all through the criminal justice system to its everyday interactions and operations. And that's why it's so important to have this very conversation that we've had today. That's why it's so important to continue to educate ourselves, educate each other, and educate institutions about their own actions and what it yields, and make sure that they understand the communities that they are supposed to be representing and supposed to be serving. Because believe it or not, the criminal justice system is supposed to be a service to all of us. Reminder, right? Like, public safety is something that's supposed to serve all of us. And so I want to just thank all the people who were here as audience members, but particularly those who participated on the panels and shared so much knowledge and information. And I'm so glad that you were able to do that with us. You know, so many of the themes that came out is that the criminal legal system feeds into so many other surrounding systems. We touched on education and child welfare earlier today, and how those juvenile justice systems are contaminated by many of those criminal justice legal policies that we see. And we talked about education and employment, and that's why the work of, you know, Behind Clean Slate is so important, right? Because what that's doing is rectifying harms caused by a system and rectifying the harms caused by the rest of society coming in and limiting people even after, right, they've paid their dues, so to speak, within the criminal legal system. So that's why that work is so important. And to keep the momentum going, I do have an announcement. Thank you, Andre, for the lead up. You know, we at the Data Collaborative for Justice and the Institute for Justice and Opportunity are partnering with Commissioner Rosado and the Division of Criminal Justice Service to launch a committee on Latinx communities within New York's criminal justice system. And that's to continue the conversation that we've just commenced today. And the reason we're doing is that there's so many questions were raised throughout these conversations today, and we're hoping to continue that work, both address the racial disparate outcomes that we're seeing, acknowledge and learn more about what we can do about that, and also propose solutions, right? Propose solutions so that the reforms that we implement actually have an impact on the racial disparities that we're seeing, with an eye toward the Latinx community, in order to make sure that there's responses and solutions that are tailored to the unique needs that are present in this community. Again, thank you, Commissioner Rosado, for your amazing leadership and your continued partnership. And thank you to Zenaida Menendez, who also led the work on this event, and all of our panelists. We are so grateful that you were able to be here. And yeah, we're launching this committee. You all may hear from us again. So if you see my name pop up in your email, please click on it and let's connect. And thank you. Thank you so much.
Hello and welcome to John Jay College of Criminal Justice. My name is Carol Mason and I'm the president of John Jay College. We are thrilled that your student has chosen John Jay as their educational home. As parents and friends of our newest bloodhounds, you're an integral member of our community and our John Jay family. Your loved one is about to go on a transformational journey in which they will pursue their educational dreams and career aspirations. Throughout this journey, their perspectives will be broadened, their knowledge will be deepened, and they will become change agents for the next generation.
The college is here to support you by providing accurate and timely information regarding campus resources and hosting various programs that connect parents and families to John Jay. We recognize how family involvement plays a key role in student success. As an inclusive and diverse community, John Jay is dedicated to educating and supporting students to achieve their academic, personal, and professional aspirations. We are pleased to welcome you and your family to this new beginning as fierce advocates for justice.
I am proud to serve as the Chief Academic Officer for our distinguished and innovative faculty. Our faculty are experts in their fields and are dedicated to teaching, student learning, and research. Our mission is to engage your student in all that John Jay has to offer, help them develop into well-rounded individuals, and ensure they have what they need to graduate successfully.
As Vice President for Enrollment Management and Student Affairs, I oversee a wide array of resources aimed at enhancing your students' experience at John Jay. From admissions to athletics to financial aid, we're here to ensure a smooth transition and ongoing success. Together, we'll explore all the opportunities John Jay offers, empowering your students to thrive.
The first time when we saw this statue, it was like I even can't to explain it, because it was like, you know, some feeling of liberty inside, so it's awesome.
We came here when it was evening, but still a lot of cars, a lot of light, so I saw that like New York never sleeps.
I remember my first time going to Times Square. I was like, wow, look at all these lights. It reminded me of the movies, especially Home Alone.
There was some kind of trepidation because I've never really been on my own city life away from my family and friends, but I was also ready for the challenge, and I really like the fact that it's a very diverse and dynamic culture in New York, so I was actually extremely excited to actually explore that option.
When they hear you with an accent, they're like, where are you from?
I come from...
They want to know where you're from.
Sweden.
The beautiful island of St. Lucia.
Beautiful island of Singapore.
I come from Jamaica.
I'm from Jamaica, and it's known as a country not only for the land and water and all that beautiful scenery, but it also has a high crime rate for us as a small country.
Everybody knows it as paradise.
I'm from the Dominican Republic. I was born and raised over there.
From Ukraine.
Ukraine. I'm from Switzerland, a very small town called Berg, which means mountain, which is actually ironic because it's a little hill. My neighbors were farmers, there's chickens running around, cows, and just green and fields, and yeah, very open.
What I miss most about home,
that is a no-brainer.
The sunlight.
The beaches.
Back home, it's like you wear bikini every day.
Food.
Some black pudding.
Carrot cake.
Riding, jet skis.
In Singapore, carrot cake is savory. It's made out of rice flour into this thing called kueh.
And one thing is IKEA. The thing I miss the most about home is my mom, of course, and my family.
Every single morning when I wake up, I think about them.
The fact that John Jay had an international students orientation allowed me to actually meet not just a fellow Jamaican, but other individuals from different countries.
We have something in common. We're not from here.
And I think because of the fact that we were experiencing the same situation, that kind of homesickness, being away from home kind of a thing.
You know, to be able to talk to them and say, okay, you have this in common with me.
We kind of ended up bonding, so I'm actually extremely good friends with quite a few of the international students. They're in several of my classes.
How John Jay has helped me make up for what I've missed from back home.
It's a night of culture where you experience other people's cuisine, other people's, the way how they dress.
Is that I've been able to get that niche of students from international students and with the International Students Association. So shout out to all my international students.
And that creates like a little mini community.
So I guess meeting like-minded people, Americans, other international students from Jamaica, from Korea. A sense of belonging that, you know, I'm amongst people who want to achieve the same things as I do.
I'm a little bit more introverted. I seem extroverted, but I don't like to involve myself very quickly. And I had to overcome that to feel comfortable in this setting. I decided to join clubs. I decided to try for dance team. I decided to just get involved. Even at orientation, International Student Orientation, our table that night, I believe, we went to dinner together because we were sitting together and we said, hey, like, we don't know anyone, let's go to dinner, you know?
It creates an environment where it's a home away from home. How if you're living here without family, because that is the most devastating part, living without family here. So if you're living without family, they create a family here in itself.
When I left Singapore, I think I returned quite a different person. In a good way. You know, you learn things that you wouldn't learn at home, especially in our culture. Like, we grow up and live with our family. We don't move out of the house. We don't really work to pay for our tuition like people do here.
The style of life is very fast. Everybody runs. So I felt like I'm taking part in some kind of marathon. My mother used to tell me that I don't plan my time ahead. But now here, like, I plan everything like a month ahead, so my mother can be proud of it.
So I think just leaving that, just learning how to do things yourself is like, it's valuable. It's a valuable life lesson. Yeah.
I find that the academic standards here actually challenge me, and I like being challenged.
The whole faculty, the whole environment that you can, you know, be yourself. Because here everybody, you know, is like authentic, they're real.
I chose John Jay because
I want to make a difference.
I wanted to study forensic science really badly because there's a need for it in my country.
John Jay really was what I was looking for in terms of filling that void for justice.
And I Googled the best school to study forensic science, and John Jay always popped up, so here I am at John Jay.
There is a support structure. John Jay is building that support structure as we speak with the International Students Association.
Try to find new friends here.
Take advantage of everything that the college is offering.
Just get involved, that's the best thing you can do.
You belong here, even though you're not from here.
Bienvenue à John Jay.
Ласкаво просимо у John Jay.
Добро пожаловать, John Jay. Willkommen zu John Jay.
Welcome to John Jay, man.
I became a student at John Jay in 1968.
In 1973, graduate of John Jay.
So I came to John Jay in January of 1977.
I graduated in 1986.
I'm originally from upstate New York, so moving to New York City was probably the biggest change of my life.
So they told me about John Jay, came highly recommended as the criminal justice school.
John Jay kept coming up as the best for forensic science.
I wanted the closest school to my house, if I could have enough money to even get on the train to school.
It was a school that would take me. Thank goodness in those days it was open admission, which turned out to be awfully good for me, and I didn't realize it at the time.
It was when it was born. It was born during the 60s. To come about and being born during that period of time, it produces a special child.
Law and order was the catchword of the day. It's hard to believe today we said you can't trust anybody over 30.
I mean, the very fact that the college was first called COPS, the College of Police Science, tells a lot about what the original focus was on the part of the faculty. They chose the name.
A small group of senior faculty members came up with the name John Jay because he was associated with New York. He was a governor of New York. He was involved with the Anti-Slavery Society, and one of the founders of the Anti-Slavery Society, and also because he was the first Chief Justice of the Supreme Court.
It was a very small student body. I would say when I first started to be measured in the hundreds because it was at the police academy. Then we were like the wandering college. We wound up wandering up to Park Avenue South, which was a bit of a debacle from an elevator usage point of view.
And then a few years later, we moved to, North Hall, which was the old I. Miller shoe factory.
In 1970, the City University began what was called the Open Admissions Program. The student body doubled in 1970. It doubled again in 1971.
And suddenly arrives, blacks and Puerto Ricans and Irish, Italian, working class kids.
This kind of a dynamic in a democratic society is very, very good. You need people who don't agree with one another to disagree publicly and understand one another.
I'm an English major
in the BA/MA program in forensic psychology.
In public administration and a minor in music composition.
In criminology with a minor in psychology.
I'm studying security management.
I majored in politics, law, and economics.
Management operations and human resources.
My major is criminal justice.
Fire and emergency services with a minor in chemistry.
My master's in forensic mental health counseling.
Political science with 2 minors. History and English. I love those 3 so much. Our history has always been about providing access and giving the best education that we can, and so justice is embedded in our history.
A lot of mottos of many colleges and universities are in Latin, and nobody really knows what they are, right? This motto here is in English, and it's fairly clear.
Either go to the Peace Corps or join FEMA or other government agencies.
To work with youth through music and other forms of art.
Underrepresented or marginalized groups I like to fight for.
I want to really become a principal one day, and I want to start my own school.
I want to be a social worker for immigration.
My career as a paramedic would be a stepping stone to be a medical doctor.
If you want to know one of the essential things about what the history of New York City is that we're going to be looking at, it's you.
The level of innovation for a younger school, the nature of the student body, it's got a whole different look and feel to it.
I've had students in Iraq, I've had students in Afghanistan, I've had students in South Africa, and I've had students in Dublin.
Early in my college life, I was a legal studies major. My family said I always talk too much, so I should be a lawyer. And it was the internship office where I signed up for the New York State Assembly and interned for the very guy that I eventually would replace in the assembly.
John Jay is a beautiful place, so it should have a beautiful building.
It looks like something that really honors the students that come here.
Having 3 floors and access to all the instrumentation, no matter, we were able to produce before, but now we can produce in 5 different fields.
I'm looking forward to encouraging the next generation of John Jay students to be successful and to do great things, and hopefully I'll go back. I want to go back and still finish my master's program at John Jay and sit in the lawn up in the new park outdoor terrace that they have there and read my book under the tree like it was supposed to be when I first got there. So I'm going to come full circle, go back to John Jay and have that experience.